Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're getting into something pretty significant. Crimes committed by, well, suits, corporations, global networks, the kind of crime that really shapes our economy, our environment. We're talking about enterprise crime. Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is to look at the three sort of major pillars here: white-collar crime, green crime, and transnational organized crime, TOC. We want to see how they work, sure, but maybe more importantly, how they often work together.
Yeah, that's crucial. It's easy to think of them as separate things, but they really aren't. They feed off each other.
How so? Like, give us an example.
Okay, think about a big company. An executive might decide to illegally dump toxic waste. That's a green crime, right?
Right.
But why? Maybe to cut costs, boost the company's profits, make their own profile look better. That's a white-collar motive driving it.
Okay, gotcha. So the green crime serves the white-collar goal. But then the profit from that is, well, dirty money. Where does TOC fit?
That's where they come in. Organized crime groups step in to basically clean it up. They buy legitimate businesses, trucking companies, maybe restaurants, real estate.
For laundering.
Exactly. Laundering the profits from that corporate pollution or maybe from drug trafficking, arms dealing, whatever. It creates this seamless loop. White-collar structures hide the green crime, and TOC provides the sort of global financial plumbing to wash the money.
Wow. Okay, that's a really powerful way to frame it. So let's start with the one most people probably think of first: white-collar crime.
Makes sense.
People hear that and maybe think huge stock market fraud, Bernie Madoff type stuff. But the sources suggest it's actually much closer to home for most of us.
It really is. The term itself, white-collar crime, actually goes back to the 1930s. A criminologist named Edwin Sutherland coined it.
Yeah.
And his definition is still pretty much the standard: a crime committed by a person of respectability and high social status in the course of his occupation. It's fundamentally about abusing trust and position.
And it's not just some abstract idea. The sources show it's happening all the time.
Oh.
Like, within just 1 year, 24% of households a quarter and 17% of individuals said they'd experienced some form of white-collar crime. That's huge.
It's staggering, yeah. And the most common types aren't necessarily the billion-dollar schemes. They're often, well, pretty mundane things, but still harmful. Credit card fraud, being misled about prices, unnecessary repairs on your car or home.
Things that make you feel ripped off, basically.
Exactly, but here's the kicker. Only about 12% of those experiences were ever reported to the police or any, consumer protection agency.
12%. Wow. So does that mean we focus too much on the really complex frauds? Maybe because the simpler, everyday stuff just doesn't get reported? Like, people think, oh, they won't care about this $50 overcharge.
I think you've hit on something really important there. That low reporting rate, it suggests people are either confused about where to go or maybe just resign like nothing will be done, which is why understanding the specific tactics is so key.
Right. And here's where it gets really interesting, moving past the general idea into how people actually get targeted.
Yeah, the different flavors of white-collar crime.
We don't need the whole academic list, but let's touch on a few that really affect people directly. How about what the sources call white-collar exploitation? What's that about?
Exploitation is maybe the most blatant type. It's when someone uses their official position, their authority, to basically force people to pay for services they should be getting anyway, for free even.
Like a bribe, but more like demanding extra for doing your actual job.
Kind of. Think of a government clerk demanding like a special handling fee to process a permit that's supposed to be free and handled routinely. They're exploiting their power over you.
Okay, that's pretty nasty. And related to that, I guess, is influence peddling.
Absolutely. That's selling your power, your access, your information. It could be a judge taking a bribe or a business exec demanding kickbacks to give someone a contract.
Yeah.
It even happens in culture, like the old practice of payola in the music industry. Paying radio stations or DJs under the table just to play certain songs, that's influence peddling.
Right. I've heard of that. Okay, then there's the betrayal from inside an organization. Internal fraud.
Yeah, huge category. You've got embezzlement, where employees steal money directly, or something called blue-collar pilferage, that's more like systematic theft of company property, tools, supplies by staff.
Okay.
But then you also have fraud going the other way, client fraud. That's when the customer is the one stealing from the organization. Think sophisticated healthcare scams, faking insurance claims, bank fraud, tax evasion.
So it cuts both ways, inside and out.
Definitely. And when all these kinds of individual acts become part of how a whole company operates, or when the company itself breaks the law, That's corporate crime, organizational crime.
So, like, the institution itself is the criminal.
Precisely. This is where you see the really big stuff impacting society. Illegal monopolies, price-fixing cartels, deliberately deceptive advertising, and, critically, ignoring worker safety laws.
Hmm.
It shows the whole organization acting against the public good.
That focus on the institution, the organization, that feels like a really good bridge to talking about green crime. Because often the worst environmental damage comes from big corporate decisions. Sorry.
Exactly right. Green crime, in broad terms, covers all the actions and outcomes that harm the environment. And they usually stem from decisions about what gets made, where it gets made, and how.
Hmm.
Our sources point out something pretty stark in many industries involved here. Cutting corners on environmental protection, basically ignoring the potential damage, often wins out over safety concerns. And the results can be, well, catastrophic.
Yeah, we've seen examples of that. But the sources also get into this interesting nuance, like there are different ways to even define what counts as a green crime. And that seems really important for, who gets prosecuted.
It's fundamental. The narrowest view is the legalist view. Pretty simple. It's only a green crime if it breaks an existing criminal law. If there's no law against it, it's not a crime, legally speaking.
Okay, straightforward, but limited.
Some would say so. That leads to the environmental justice view. This perspective argues that just sticking to existing laws is too narrow. It ignores environmental harms that might not be illegal yet, but disproportionately hurt vulnerable communities, like low-income areas or minority neighborhoods often targeted for dumping sites.
Right, so it brings in fairness and impact.
Exactly. And then there's the broadest view, the biocentric approach. This one's radical. It says environmental harm is basically any human activity that messes up a biosystem, that destroys plant and animal life. Doesn't matter if there's a specific law against it or not.
Wow, okay, that biocentric view really shifts things. It suggests that damage we're causing now, even if it's technically legal today, could be seen as criminal harm from that perspective.
It absolutely could. It frames the whole issue differently. But even sticking to the legal definition, there are huge criminal enterprises built around things like illegal logging, smuggling endangered wildlife, illegal fishing fleets, and of course, vast amounts of illegal dumping and polluting.
And who's supposed to stop this? In the U.S. at least.
Primarily the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. They got full law enforcement powers back in 1988. But crucially, the sources also emphasize the role of ordinary citizens and activist groups.
How so?
Well, these groups often do the groundwork, the monitoring, especially in places where official enforcement might be, shall we say, lacking or influenced by class or race dynamics. They step in where maybe the official system leaves communities vulnerable.
That makes sense. Okay, so we've got the white-collar angle, the green angle. Now let's bring in that third piece, the global organized element. Transnational organized crime, TOC. This sounds like the engine that helps the other two operate internationally.
It often is. Organized crime isn't new, of course. It goes back centuries. Even the traditional U.S. mafia, well, maybe declining a bit from its peak due to prosecutions, it's still around. Estimates suggest maybe 25,000 members, 250,000 affiliates worldwide.
So significant.
Yeah, but the global threat from newer, more diverse transnational organized crime groups is really soaring.
So TOC is basically organized crime that doesn't care about borders.
Exactly. They make incredible amounts of money supplying illegal goods and services across the globe. Drugs are huge, obviously, but also weapons, counterfeit goods, pornography, and tragically trafficking people, sex slaves.
And their methods are pretty sophisticated.
Oh, absolutely. Large-scale drug distribution networks, complex extortion rackets, illegal gambling empires, massive cargo theft operations, and they're very tech-savvy. They use cyberspace, extensively encrypted comms, the dark web to coordinate, recruit, and sell their illegal products and services worldwide.
And where are these groups strongest?
They've really exploded in regions with maybe weaker governments or less stable conditions, parts of Asia, Eastern Europe, Latin America. But because global travel, trade, and finance are so easy now.
Our own interconnectedness helps them.
Ironically, yes. It makes it easier for them to move money, goods, and people, and ultimately to target the more prosperous countries for their markets and laundering operations.
So controlling them must be incredibly difficult, requires global effort.
Totally. It relies heavily on federal agencies working together across borders. There are specific international task forces, like the Eurasian Organized Crime Working Group, Central European groups, trying to coordinate efforts.
And domestically. What tools do we use? I know the ICO Act comes up a lot.
Yes, ARCO, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, is a game changer.
Why is it so effective against these kinds of groups?
Because IKEA lets prosecutors go after the entire organization, not just the individuals caught committing a specific crime. Crucially, you can charge the leaders, the bosses, for crimes committed by their underlings as part of the criminal enterprise, even if the boss didn't directly participate in that specific act.
Ah, so it pierces that veil of insulation the leaders usually have.
Exactly. It hits the command structure, allowing law enforcement to dismantle the whole operation, not just, arrest a few street-level dealers or enforcers.
Okay, so we've laid out the, white-collar, green, TOC, and a bit of the how they operate and interconnect. But let's dig into the why. If we connect this to the bigger picture, what actually drives these people, especially the white-collar folks, the professionals, the execs? Why risk it all?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? There are a few main theories. A big one is rational choice, the idea that it's a calculated decision.
Calculated based on what? Greed.
That's one version. Pure greed. The person weighs the potential profit against the perceived risk of getting caught and punished and decides the reward is worth the gamble. They see it as a rational shortcut to wealth.
Or maybe it's not just greed. Could it be need?
That's the other side of the rational choice coin. Need. Maybe someone is facing overwhelming financial pressure, debt, or even some kind of psychological need, and they see crime as the only way out. Still a calculation, but driven by desperation, not just avarice.
Okay, so it's a cost-benefit analysis, one way or another.
Pretty much. But then there's a psychological layer. Rationalization and neutralization. This is really interesting. It's about how offenders justify their actions to themselves. They develop these mental frameworks to make the illegal behavior seem okay, or at least not that bad.
How does that work? Like, what do they tell themselves?
A common one is denying the victim. They convince themselves that the person or entity they're harming doesn't deserve sympathy. Maybe it's a big, faceless corporation, or the government, they waste tax money anyway, or even another business person. It's just competition, dog eat dog. It makes the crime feel less personal, less wrong.
Right. Turns it into a game almost.
Or maybe it's not even an individual choice, but the environment. The cultural view suggests some business organizations actually promote crime. The corporate culture itself encourages or even demands rule-bending, unethical shortcuts. Just like some neighborhood environments might foster youth gangs, it becomes the norm to succeed there.
Learned behavior, basically.
Yeah. And one more angle is the self-control view. This suggests that maybe some white-collar offenders just have inherently low self-control. They act impulsively, chasing immediate gratification, the quick profit, the thrill, without really thinking through the long-term consequences, the potential ruin.
Fascinating. Okay, so we have these potential causes. Greed, need, justification, culture, maybe low self-control. How do we try and control this stuff, especially the organizational, corporate crime?
Broadly, there are two main strategies discussed in the sources. First, you have compliance strategies.
Compliance, meaning getting companies to follow the rules without necessarily punishing individuals.
Exactly. The goal is law conformity through prevention. Think internal audits, clear ethical guidelines, training programs, whistleblower protections.
Yeah.
Setting things up so violations are less likely to happen in the first place. It's proactive.
Okay. Trying to build a better culture internally. What's the alternative?
The other approach is deterrence strategies. This is the more traditional, reactive, law and order approach.
So catching people after the fact and punishing them.
Right. Detecting violations, investigating, assigning responsibility, and then hitting offenders with penalties, fines, jail time, sanctions. The idea being that this punishment will deter them and others from doing it again. It's about making the consequences seem high.
Prevention versus punishment, basically.
In a nutshell, yeah. You need both, realistically.
So what does this all mean? We started this conversation looking at what seemed like maybe three distinct types of crime. The corporate fraud, the illegal polluting, the global gangs. But as we've unpacked it, they're clearly not separate.
Not at all. They're deeply intertwined. The tools, the money, the networks, they flow between them. White-collar financial tricks are used to launder money from environmental crime or drug running, Organized crime networks provide the muscle or the smuggling routes needed for both.
It's a system.
It really is.
Yeah.
And understanding that system, knowing the specific tactics that influence peddling is real, that payola happens, that corporations might fix prices or hide safety risks, that knowledge is really your best defense as a citizen, as a consumer. It helps you see the hidden costs we all end up absorbing.
Yeah, absolutely. And thinking about that, this deep dive really leaves us with a big challenging question, especially around green crime. It's something the source material kind of puts out there.
Mhm.
Given the sheer scale of the harm, social harm, environmental harm caused by all these forms of enterprise crime, is it actually enough for us to define crime only by what's currently written down in criminal law? That legalist view.
That's the core dilemma. Is that definition sufficient? Or do we need to consider taking that much bigger, much harder step? Adopting something like the biocentric approach, saying that any human activity that significantly disrupts a biosystem should maybe be considered a crime, regardless of whether we have a specific statute for it yet.
That's a huge question.
It is. And how you answer that question, how broadly we should define crime, especially environmental crime, to truly protect the planet and ensure justice, that choice fundamentally shapes everything else. It dictates the kind of enforcement we demand, the level of accountability we expect, and ultimately the kind of future we're building. Something definitely for you, the listener, to think about.